Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. No special announcements or anything, so let's jump right in. First up, Hidden Palace recently posted a few unreleased prototypes of a Sega Saturn game called Hard Boiled. This game was actually released on the PS1, but never made it over to the Saturn because the company that was working on it ended up going out of business before the Saturn port and the PC port, I believe, was finished. These prototypes were actually given to Hidden Palace by the game's programmer, which is awesome. That means they're totally legit. And there's 3 different versions that have different things going for them. One has the ability to skip through levels. The other has much less bugs and a few extra features like cutscenes, but you lose the level skip. And Dan really did a great job just going through all of this stuff and kind of laying out exactly what to expect from this. But I think it's pretty neat. I mean, I always love seeing unreleased games, which I'll talk about again in a second. And while this one was something that you could pick up on a PlayStation 1 version, it's just really cool to see what the Saturn version had in mind and how they could have differed. And, anybody who follows these different versions of the games from back then knew how different some of them could actually be. So, maybe this would have been an upgrade, maybe it not. I don't know. But I strongly recommend checking out Dan's post because it's got all of the differences between them, or basically all the things that you would need to know before jumping in. And if you decide the game's not for you, to be honest, Dan's post really just kind of sums everything up so nicely. Maybe you just read through it and go, okay, that's enough for me. But either way, it's always cool to see prototypes released. And, this one does kind of look like a fun game that I personally have never played before, not even the PS1 version. Next up, at that same time, Hidden Palace also posted another unreleased game, this one for the Sega Genesis, and this is called Out of the Vortex, which is based on the 1993 comic series of the same name. It's a beat-em-up game, and while the game seems to still be a little bit glitchy, it appears to be mostly playable, and there's even a playthrough I found, which I embedded in here as well. And I think this one was important to talk about because, and I'm going to just quote Hidden Palace here, the game was never announced, referenced, or hinted at in any magazine or trade show event and remains a mystery. This build in particular is most likely a prototype meant for pitching the game to potential publishers. So I think maybe there was another prototype of this game that was out there before. Maybe Hidden Palace hadn't made as big of a deal about it if it was, but or maybe I'm getting all that wrong. But even if I got all of that last bit wrong, the point is this is kind of a neat game that you might not have ever even heard existed. So it's kind of cool if you want to check it out. If you're a fan of Genesis beat 'em up games, you could check out the embedded video, download the ROM and try it yourself, or just kind of skim the Hidden Palace post for all of the inside info on it. Next up, the Shiro crew recently did a podcast talking about hacking and reverse engineering Sega Saturn games, and they had some awesome guests on there. Trekkies Unite, Derek Pescarilla, Malenko, and Bo Bales. And if you were really curious of how this stuff works, even if you're like me and you're not smart enough to hack into old video games, I still started listening to this and really found it fascinating. And I was always very interested in how people even go about starting the process of doing anything like that. So this one's on my list. I ended up switching over to reading Annie Jacobson's new book about nuclear war, which is really depressing. So I probably should have just stuck with this nerd stuff and been a lot happier at the end of it. But I will get back to this as soon as that audiobook's over, and this one will cheer me up, I'm sure. So anyway, this seemed like an awesome one. And if you're into Saturn stuff at all, I highly recommend checking it out. And they're available everywhere, just like my podcast. Wherever you find a podcast, just type in Sega Saturn Shiro, and this one should pop up. Next up, GitHub user Emus has been posting some really awesome updates to the PC version of OutRun 2, or OutRun 2006 Coast to Coast. And there are so many really cool features that have tweaks and bug fixes, and a couple of the ones that I thought were really important were a borderless windowed mode, which is neat. That's something that could be handy, but also the ability to lock it to 60 frames per second, regardless of what refresh rate your display is at. I will wholeheartedly admit when I first saw this, I thought that meant that you could run this game at like native 120 or 144 hertz. However, that's not the case. But this is still an important update because originally you would run this 60 hertz game. If you put it on a computer that was plugged into a faster monitor, the game could speed up, it could glitch out. Whereas now internally, the game still runs at 60 frames per second, regardless of what your display is at. So that way it still looks perfectly smooth and everything else will still work. You just don't have to change the settings of your PC every time you launch the game. But there's also better controller support and rumble. There's corrections for aspect aspect ratio. So if you're using an ultra wide monitor, things don't stretch out like that. This is really just the perfect way to experience the PC version of this game today. I think if there are other versions out there that might be better, if there's one that's tweaked to run at 120 or 144 hertz, please let me know in the comments. But I love this game. It's probably my go-to and one of my favorite, if not my favorite, PlayStation 2 game, just because it's everything I would want, right? It's just as fun as the original OutRun, but it's a more modern version of it. Runs at 480p, so it looks great. And running it on a PC now, it's very smooth. It looks excellent, and it's something that if you're a fan of the game, you should absolutely check out. So for more info, take a look at Donald's post. All of the links are right in there, but fans of OutRun 2, at the very least, check out Donald's post and then go to the GitHub and kind of see what it's got. But this is something that you're almost surely going to want to try out. Next, the Home Arcade System, or HAS Supergun, is back in stock again at its latest version 5.0. And the last time I said it was back in stock, it sold out like immediately. But at the time of recording this, they're still in stock, so please don't hate me if this comes out and they're already out. But this, in many people, including my own opinions, is the go-to supergun if you're looking for every feature, all the compatibility stuff, rapid fire. I mean, the creator, Michael, has been working on this for a long time and really strived to make this the best it possibly could be. And the price is $145 plus shipping, which is incredibly reasonable for everything that you're getting with this. All the functionality and all of the safety features built in, which of course it is my job to warn you all that regardless of every safety feature ever possibly implemented in a supergun, it's still a little bit more complicated than just plugging in an RGB SCART cable into a SCART device. You just want to make sure that you don't turn up the brightness compensation too high, although that shouldn't blow anything out, especially if you start with it in the middle. Audio protection should be on there, but if you have any worries on that, just check out that video I did about that $35 scope that would really, while I wouldn't recommend you design products around a $35 piece of test equipment, it'll guarantee that you're not going to blow out any SCART equipment. But once again, this is about as safe as it gets, so I'm being overly cautious just to help you save your equipment just in case, but putting the levels, the video level in the middle should be completely fine for something like this. The only other things to note, it does not come with a PSU. Obviously, no, I don't remember any supergun that did, so I left links to the ones that I use. Also, it uses an 8-pin mini DIN for RGB output, so I left a link to the proper cable to use for that. And that's basically it. If you liked the AshenWorks power supply, there are adapter cables that allow you to use that pretty easily, I think right on the AshenWorks website. And if you're using anything like a CPS 2 or 3, 1, 2, or 3, or even the Mortal Kombat machines, you're definitely going to want to get kick harnesses as well to implement those other buttons. But links for everything are all in here. And hopefully this is in stock because this is what a lot of people have been waiting for. Darth Cloud, the creator of the Blue Retro project, has now launched a pre-order for his first official product that he is selling. Blue Retro has been used in a ton of different Bluetooth adapters, but this is the first one that he himself is making, and it's for the original Xbox. They're calling it the BRX, and the price is $50, and they're due to ship to customers around October. So all that's pretty straightforward. There's some good news on the latency side of things, but it looks neat. It looks like exactly what you would expect from an original Xbox Bluetooth adapter. And they are, of course, compatible with the latest version of the Xbox controllers, the Series X and Elite versions. And the latency on those is pretty good. But it also is incredibly important to keep this in context with the original. An original wired Xbox controller tested via the incredibly accurate Arduino-based MR test that I always talk about. The original Xbox controller has about 6.75 milliseconds of latency, while the modern wireless ones have about 16 milliseconds. So averaging less than 10 milliseconds of average latency on a console that has a frame buffer built in, that was designed around the era where people were still using CRTs, but slowly switching to flat panels. I don't think anybody's going to notice that. If you have proof of anything different, please let me know in the comments, and not proof meaning some Smash player told you once at a tournament. I mean actual real proof with pro gamers or any kind of measurements that show it. But I think this is a pretty safe bet that you could just use this with a modern Xbox controller and just not feel any latency, any controller latency. You're still going to have display latency, scalar latency, whatever else you put in there. But if you're running this through a Tink 4K or 5X into your OLED TV or something, I think you're going to be totally fine. Now, if you are a blasphemous gamer who wants to hook up a PlayStation controller to an Xbox, you can get the new DualShock PS5 controller, which would add just under 4 milliseconds of latency to the original, 4 milliseconds over what the original would be. But honestly, I mean, this is, in my opinion, I think if somebody wants to use a wireless controller with the Xbox, original Xbox, grabbing the modern controllers and using this, I think would be a perfectly good solution that I don't think anybody's going to notice any latency for. And I really like the new controllers. They're very comfortable. So links to everything, including both the Xbox Series and Elite controllers, are right here. And I'm looking forward to trying it out. Next up, the RetroTink 4K, at least right now, is still in stock. I think Mike was able to make a large enough batch this time in order for them to be in stock for at least a little while. And on top of that, there are distributors in the UK, Germany, and Switzerland that are getting stock of this very soon. In fact, the units are already en route to these different distributors. However, Mike's policy on all of the Tinks are no pre-orders. List stock when they get in, and that's for everybody, including himself. So it looks to be that these stores are going to get them hopefully this week, if not very soon. And as soon as they're listed, I will update this post. Although I did talk to a couple of them, and Dragonbox reminded me that they have an interest check list, not a pre-order. So when these are listed, all of the people who are on that list will get instantly emailed. So there's a good chance that these might sell out from those distributors pretty quickly. But this is good. It just means that we're getting one step closer to just always having stock of Tink 4Ks. I think we're pretty much like that and have been with the Tink 5X. So it's always just a matter of, can you make enough and have how many people who are interested have already bought it yet and all that stuff. But I think we're finally at a place where they're almost going to just be in regular stock. Maybe the next batch, maybe this one, who knows, but that's good news. So I will update this post and repost on social media every time any of these companies get stock. But if you click on that link and they're immediately sold out, that's what happened. Their notification list went out immediately. People were able to grab them. So don't worry. I think all of these companies and Mike are really, really trying to get stock so that people could just buy these, because features keep coming in on the Tink 4K. People are starting to really see what it could do, and I think people are really understanding why so many people want this thing. So now there's a much better chance that you can get it. And speaking of the RetroTink 4K, Marco Retro just posted an update to his video about RetroTink 4K downscaling. And this is based on a new beta firmware that Mike's working on that's available for public download if you want to be a beta tester. And it adds a couple of features that are fairly important. The first, the easy one, is the ability to use the menu in 240p mode, which was a big complaint of Marco in the original video. And now that that works, that's going to make people who use this for downscaling have a lot easier of a time. However, now there's the ability to output interlaced video. And that's a big deal in certain scenarios, not all. Marco goes through the scenario of downscaling video games to 480i, which is definitely a bonus if you're using a more modern game, like something off of the Wii U or Switch. Some of those games are a perfect fit for interlaced video downscaling, because you could still use them on a CRT, but you get that slight extra detail at 60 frames per second, assuming the original game is at 60. However, another pretty awesome feature is this should mean that you're able to use the RetroTink 4K's comb filter and time-based correction for analog video, specifically magnetic tape video. So just like the RetroTink 5X, you're probably, I haven't tested it yet, but you should probably be able to essentially use this device as a dedicated time-based corrector. And with the correct capture card, you could get yourself original, unaltered copies of your analog tape media. So why does that matter? Well, if you're using a tink to scale, you're most likely doing something like, hey, my relative gave me a box of old VHS tapes or Video 8 tapes and said, can you put these on the YouTube for me or something? So rather than go through the insane process of trying to do all of this to its original format and scale it, you just put it through the tink, it spits out your HD or 4K file, and you're completely done, and you just upload them as is. And that's awesome. The ease of use is just unparalleled when it comes to this stuff for equipment that you could buy brand new today. Except, what if you stumble across something that's really important to you? Some footage of a past family member or just a really important life event. You're going to want to squeeze every tiny bit of scaling that you possibly could out of it, which a dedicated box is not going to compare to a slow software-based version. So now you could rip essentially your entire videos to direct 4K and also take your favorite and have it go to 480i. So you're using the time-based correction and comb filtering if you have a composite video only source, but you still get the original resolution. And then you use slow software to scale that to 4K and then edit it after the fact. So the fact that you could now use once again, I haven't tested it, but you could probably use both tinks to do this is a really, really big deal. If you're into this stuff. If you have no magnetic tape media to transfer, then I have just wasted 2 minutes of your time, and I apologize. But definitely check out this video from Marco. It's a short one because it's just an update to the other one. But I will absolutely be doing a deep dive test in an entire separate video by the end of the summer showing you how to use the tinks to do exactly what I just said. So if you have any questions and you have anything that you really want to make sure that I show in that video, please let me know in the comments. I think I'm so excited about this stuff, I'll probably, as usual, dump too much info into the video, but, hopefully you get what I mean. So check out Marco's post, check out the video, and I will be following up very soon with a magnetic tape transfer version of essentially passing 480i through. Next up, Highly Limited Analogue has just started selling an all-aluminum version of their Pocket handheld console, and they're being advertised as available in, as before, highly limited quantities. The price is more than double the original at about $500, and there were 4 editions available. The indigo bluish purple one seems to have sold out by the time I got to recording this, but the other ones seem to still be up for sale. There's just a natural, regular aluminum colored version. There's a silverish looking one that they're calling Noir, and a black one still available. They're due to start shipping right away, so if you've purchased them, they should ship this week anyway. And the regular editions are not in stock, but I'm assuming those are coming back at some point. And I have to be blunt, I absolutely love this one. I think that there's a lot of people out there that would really want to spend the extra money on the all aluminum shell for the same reason people spend the extra money on the all metal shells for original Game Boy and Color and all of that stuff. All those shells that Tito's been covering that I thought were really great. I've gotten to hold a couple of them before and play them, and it feels like a slightly different experience. And, if you work hard and you've saved your money and you don't mind spending more than double on it, maybe this is something that you'd really like. But I also love that it's an option. And I really think this is what the NT Mini should have been. It should have had a $500 version with an all aluminum shell, but then just also have a plastic version that more people could afford. Maybe they'd still be up for sale if they were able to do it that way. I don't know why, but the NT Mini forcing you to spend money on a really nice shell that most people didn't care about, that kind of sucked. So also, like the NT Mini, it's supposed to be very high quality. They said each and every piece of the enclosure is fabricated entirely from solid billet 6061 aluminum, and that includes everything: the front and back, the buttons, the D-pad, the rear door for it, everything. So I personally think this is awesome, and I love that there's a choice, and I've actually really liked all of the different editions of the Pocket. To be honest, if I was a handheld gamer, I would have a really hard time picking whichever one I wanted to be, whichever one I wanted to decide on, because, the original 2 colors were great, but so were all the other ones. And I don't know, this one seems really awesome. So if they're still available by the time this goes out, take a look, decide if you want to spend more than double, if you'd rather spend that money to get 2 or to get a Mister and a Pocket. But I'm not shaming anybody who spends the extra money, because if I were a handheld gamer and I had cash to burn, I would absolutely buy one of these because they look really cool. And I also really enjoyed how the other metal cased handhelds I had used in the past felt. So links are in the description, and hopefully my opinions aren't as highly limited as the quantities. Next up, Heber, the company who did the original design for the Mr. Multi-System, just opened pre-orders on a Raspberry Pi compute module-based kit that aims to look like a video game console or a streaming box, or basically anything other than a science project with all wires coming out of it, like your average Raspberry Pi setup. And it's able to do so by tapping into the compute module's pins, where you put it in and it breaks out all of the connectors. So in the front, you have a bunch of USB ports, access to the micro SD card, and a power switch. In back, you have 2 HDMI ports, Ethernet, power, and a composite video output. No audio output because of the way that this is designed, or the compute module is designed. However, you could obviously just get a cheap HDMI audio extractor from one of the 2 ports, or you could get a $25 analog output adapter that gets audio through a digital to analog converter, which Heber's a company that Richard puts a lot of time into his DACs. He doesn't use cheap crap with tinny sound. If he's put a DAC in it, it's not going to stink. And also it has a SCART or D-sub video output. There's both on there. You can only use one at a time, but that means you basically have access to full analog output options as well, including just the composite video in back if you would like. And overall, it looks pretty neat. The fully loaded version, including Compute Module 4, including absolutely everything except the power supply, which I'm assuming is just regional issues, is $260. If you want just the kit and you supply your own Compute Module, it's $130. Once again, that analog output adapter is $25. And I did want to ask Richard a little bit about the Compute Module 5s, as they were just announced, but not released yet. And they might be out before these ship, which are supposed to be by the end of the year. So pre-orders are open until August 25th. They'll supposedly ship before the end of the year. But what happens if you buy one of these kits and the Compute Module 5 comes out? And that's kind of tricky because it should work. There could be some differences. You're not going to be able to get access to every single Compute Module 5 feature because they weren't put on this motherboard. But I'm genuinely curious to see if there's a difference. And I mean that as a nerd with no emotion. When it comes to using video game and computer and arcade emulation on Raspberry Pi hardware, are people actually going to see a difference using the Compute Module 5 versus the Compute Module 4? And also, what's the difference between the Compute Module 4 and the Raspberry Pi 5 or the Raspberry Pi 4? So I'd love to see somebody do a deep dive of this just to see, but it's not going to be a massive difference. It's not like the CM5 is going to be able to do 4K 240 or something. They've kind of talked about it a little bit, and it doesn't seem to be a huge jump in anything. So I think that if you loved the look of this and you really wanted a Raspberry Pi solution for anything that's kind of broken out this way, I think this is a pretty cool buy. If you're somebody that wants to squeeze as much power as you possibly can out of your tiny little emulation box, maybe wait to see what some of the testers say about software on this versus the 5 versus anything else. But I don't know. I wanted to share it because I thought it was really cool, and I think a lot of people might be interested. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm just going to skim through these, giving my thoughts where I feel like it, but if you want visual examples and a ton more info, please check out Lou's video. First up, Bedroom Ninja has released the 3D files to the first version of the Nintendo Famicom Disk System NFC case. So essentially, it looks exactly like the FDS, the actual disk drive for the original Famicom, but you could slide in your NFC cards and launch them that way. I think this looks so freaking cool, and if you're a fan of the disk system, this is absolutely something to consider. I've already just gushed over how much I love this physical launching of games via NFC, but if you want to go a step further, I would absolutely at least check out what this looks like and see if you want to either build it yourself, meaning print it yourself, or if you want to buy it, if you let them know, maybe they'll list it in their store. I don't know. But that looked really cool, and I think that's something a bunch of us might be interested in. Next up, the QM Tech DE10 Nano alternative is up for sale, and it's also getting a dedicated Mr. I/O and USB board specifically made for it. The I/O and USB are merged into one single board, and the setup was shown off in a custom case. So this add-on board is currently undergoing verification, and that will go on sale soon. Now, the QM Tech is another homebrew DE10, just made by the company QM Tech. And as with all of these homebrews, I think they're awesome ideas. I love that they're aiming to be less expensive. The QM Tech's $100 cheaper than the DE10. The other one, which we'll talk about in a minute, is supposed to be even cheaper. But people in the community definitely need to put these through their paces before I just blindly say, all right, everybody buy it. And I mean that with love and respect. And the other one, Takis, I believe they're on the same page because they keep testing stuff and posting videos and showing people. So, they're a little bit more upfront with the testing that they've been doing. And I'm not saying QM Tech didn't do testing. I'm just saying there's a lot more out there on social media. So I want to be very polite but blunt and clear. I am fired up and excited for both of these because this would allow so many more people to jump into Mister or get a second for dual setups or something. But we just got to double and triple check that they actually perform with no quality loss before we go into it. My gut says they'll probably be fine, but let's just, I'm going to personally just be patient and hopefully get some of these to test. If QM Tech or Taki want to send them to me, that's fine. I probably planned on buying one of Taki's anyway, but we'll see when that comes out. Next up, Wizzo showed off another example of what the new Tap2 serial driver can do. And with that software driver, you could expand the capabilities beyond NFC. And Wizzo showed off using a Pi Pico wired to just some buttons that perform different actions via Tap2. So some of the programmed actions that Wizzo showed just as a proof of concept are running a random Sonic game, performing keyboard inputs, exiting a game, or running update all. So I think all of us with Mister setups that get a little complicated could already envision in their heads what they could use something like this for. I personally would love to fire up my Mister, come back a couple of minutes later, because it usually takes forever for Wi-Fi to connect, and then just press an update all button so that I don't even have to turn on my display. I could just, update it that way. There's other ways to do that. Of course, you could use the remote app or other stuff, but just saying, also, maybe enable rapid fire. There's a bunch of different things I could personally think of, depending on which setup, that I could really use dedicated buttons like this for. So that's pretty cool. Check that out if you want more info. Next up, the other DE10 alternative from Taki Udon is going into production soon, and the price for a full kit, that's the DE10 homebrew board, 128 megabytes of RAM, a USB hub, and the 9.2 version of the Analogue I/O board, the 24-bit compatible, will be about $150 for everything. That's nuts. That's awesome. I want this thing to succeed so badly. Once again, just nerdy caution up in the air as always. Nothing against any of these sellers, but yeah, this is going to be pretty incredible if it, as long as it performs right. Also, Taki showed some 3D rendered versions of the dedicated Mister console that they're working on, which is not the same thing. This is just a dedicated unit, and I like to see 3D renders. I think that's very cool, but I'm very excited to actually see that one in action. And also, I'm really fired up to see the cheaper homebrew version of all of this, because I think that's the one in the short term that people are really going to want. Obviously, the consoles has the potential to be amazing, but this thing for $160 to jump in is just awesome, and I really hope this thing works out. Next up, Attract17 posted an update on the Twin Cobra Mister FPGA core by Darren O. It's taking shape, and he'll pull PCB measurements and address any remaining bugs before release. Love it. Always love another game on Mister. Speaking of which, Hotega just added beta System 18 support for Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, which is different than the Genesis version, and it's kind of a neat game. It's got all the music that you would want. It's an isometric beat 'em up, and anybody who's part of Hotega's beta program, the Patreon support, can get access to this. But Hotego also released the JT House core to the public, and there's a whole bunch of awesome games on there like Splatterhouse, Pac-Mania, a bunch of very cool vertical oriented games. So anybody with dedicated Tate setups should be pretty excited. So all you need is just to run update all. You don't need any subscription. That beta program is just for beta testers. So all of these games, there's a bunch of them available, can now just be used just by downloading it. Hotego also released the Neo Geo Pocket core to the public, and there's still more work to do, but Hotego says the pending work on the core can be done independently. So you could at least start using it, just see what you think. And lastly, Mr. Add-ons updated his controller latency database, which has been my go-to for quite a long time. The work that he and other people who have contributed done to that and have done is pretty amazing, and has really changed the way, I hope has changed the way most of us approach how we buy our controllers, because now we really know when the controller is adding latency, or for things like you saw the BRX adapter before. So if you were wondering what the new stuff was, or if you'd been searching to see the latency of a controller that hadn't been listed yet, check it out and see if it's up there. And hopefully what you were looking for has already been tested. So that's it for this week. As always, thanks to Lou. I could never keep up with all this stuff without him, and I'm so happy to support him on Patreon because I want him to keep doing this because I don't have the time to. So if you rely on Lou as much as I do, please consider supporting as well. Before I go, just a quick shout out to Tito from Macho Nacho. He did a video about buying a used and sort of broken PlayStation 2 Slim and how to restore it from a more basic perspective. And I wanted to share that because this isn't like a deep dive, buy an oscilloscope and calibrate a laser and, do a mod chip type of thing. This is really more of a general video for anybody who buys a used console and it might be broken. So disassembly, cleaning, different tricks and stuff like that. I just thought it was really neat and wanted to share it. I'm not sure if Tito just didn't have time to get a post up or maybe he didn't think it was a good fit for RetroRGB, but I think it's a good fit. So I wanted to just share it here, and I didn't have time to write the post myself. I actually missed a bunch of stuff this week, but I don't think any of it was time sensitive, no pre-orders or anything. So hopefully I'll have enough time to catch up. I also really want to dig into a couple more VHS videos that I've been working on, and I think I got a flow down to the point where it would make it easier to teach people how to do it with less headaches. So I'm going to try to spend some time on that, which means there might be less posts next week. I don't know. It's always such a hard balance, right? Because I could spend 100% of my time on YouTube videos, but then everything else falls off. And if I don't do any other YouTube videos, I don't get to share some of the awesome stuff that I've been learning, but I also don't get to promote RetroRGB and start to, the subscribers don't grow. So it's always a delicate balance of what to do. But anyway, the reason I can do this is because of all of you. So thank you all so much to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in any way, because it's you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you all for your support, and I will see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.